All right, guys, in this video, we are going to do the tell-all comprehensive guide on how to price lawn care and landscaping jobs. We'll cover everything from like lawn maintenance to like installs and projects. So buckle up. This one might be a little bit lengthy, but this is probably the most commonly asked question literally on TikTok or Instagram. I probably get at least 1 or 2 DMs a day about this. So we're going to make a video to kind of summarize everything and give you what you need to know. We're going to cover sort of the main pillars of what goes into pricing all of this, including the mindset change that you need to make in order to charge what you're actually worth and run a profitable business. If this is you and you're getting started and you're stuck in that $20 an hour guy, we're going to get you out of that phase as quickly as possible, but also give you some tips and tricks on how to leverage that phase startup era of your business to actually make it worth it and get something out of it to accelerate you out of that era of I'll do it for less as soon as possible. Third thing, pricing. When it boils down to it, really, you just need to know the numbers. You have to have your overhead. You have to have your running costs. All of that stuff is important to know. When it comes to the landscaping industry or home service industry, the term knowing your numbers is thrown around a lot, but no one really gives you a full breakdown on how to actually calculate it for yourself. And there might be some things that you guys haven't thought of that I'm going to give you in this video to hopefully be helpful and give you the most accurate possible breakdown on how you can figure this out for yourself. It's not that complicated. You just need to sit down, put your thinking cap on. You could do this on the back of a napkin if you really wanted to. And after you do it, your pricing will be more accurate and you will make more money. It's that simple. And also, we're going to cover what the landscaping business really is. To summarize it, it's time and materials. You may have heard that before, but really, landscaping is a labor arbitrage business. You're going to buy labor low and sell it for more. We'll break down that a little bit more in the later half of this video. And also, if you stick around, we're going to give you guys some calculators, some free tools, and we'll run through some kind of examples to give you guys hopefully a much clearer idea of not only how to calculate these things, but also how to implement them into your business. All right, so let's get started. One of the first things that you need to be able to change is your mindset, and you need to be able to be comfortable handing someone a bill for potentially thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, maybe closer to hundreds if you're doing like mowing and maintenance, stuff like that. But I see a lot of guys, and I totally understand. When I was running my landscaping business and lawn care business, rewind real quick. First of all, if you guys don't know who I am, or if you're on the video for the first time or on the channel for the first time, my name is Bing. I own Landscape Accelerator. I took my own landscaping business from 0 to 250K in the first season. For the past 3 years, I've done coaching, consulting, marketing for landscaping and green industry businesses. So I know a thing or two about this stuff. So if you're listening and wondering who's this guy yapping on the screen, there you go. So anyways, now that you have the 10-second history story, let's get into this. So I remember the first time that I submitted an estimate for a project that was over $1,000, I was like shitting my pants, right? I could not believe, I couldn't fathom or understand that, I was literally going to be receiving thousands of dollars from this particular customer. My mind like got warped in that moment, especially after they approved it, right? And it's really hard because I remember the transition from working for a landscaping business, making $18 an hour after working there for like a minute and, $16 an hour, $16.50, and then $18 an hour once I'd kind of worked my way up a little bit, which is not anything to brag about really. So you get used to being paid by the hour to now all of a sudden handing customers invoices or, pay me tickets for thousands of dollars, right? And that mindset shift kind of is difficult to adjust to for sometimes. It almost feels like you're robbing people. It's not, but that's just because you've been used to being undervalued for your time. And we'll talk more about this when we get to this portion of the video. But really, all the landscaping business is, and most home services, honestly, is time and materials and labor arbitrage. So time and materials is exactly what it sounds like. Those are the two areas where you're making profit. You're making profit on, you're paying your guy $18 an hour to do the work, but you're billing the customer $25, right? And you're making the spread on that. So that's what labor arbitrage is essentially. As the business owner, you're buying labor for a cheaper cost than you're selling it to the customer for. So that's where you're making your money on time. And then on materials, let's say it cost you $32 to get a yard of mulch, and you install it and, sell it to the customer for whatever, 50 to 100, right? Probably closer to 100. That would be better if you're trying to actually make money doing this. So that's your difference on the materials, right? And maybe you don't want to factor in the actual like delivery and installation. You'll just, sell the yard of mulch to the customer for like 50%, or, you'll mark up your gravel or your retaining wall blocks. You'll buy them from the distributor, and then you'll mark them up by like 20%. And that's what the customer pays, right? So you make a little bit of money on the materials, and then you make money on the time and labor to actually do that. So basically what I'm trying to say is you have been used to getting paid the $18 an hour to do the work, but now you're paying someone else to do it, and you're the one that's making, whatever, the 25 or the thousands of dollars a day, depending on the project. So the first couple of times that you submit these estimates for higher ticket projects, you might have to deal with the fact that it's a little uncomfortable almost, but you have to understand this is a business, not a charity. You started this business to make money, right? And really what you're afraid of is you're afraid of rejection. You're afraid that customers are going to say no. You're afraid that the customer is going to be like, you're a fucking scammer. You're a ripoff. I can't believe you'd ever charge me this amount of money. You're not worth it. That is the mindset gap that you have to get out of and get over, is the I'm not worth it. Or the customer will say no. You're afraid of the rejection, and you're afraid that the rejection will prove to yourself that you're not worth it. Okay, I hope that made sense. I know we're getting a little deep and spiritual and woo-ha in this, but it really is a big problem. And that is the single mindset shift that most guys can't make to get out of the startup phase, to get out of the $20 an hour guy phase. And they get stuck there, and they end up working for free. They end up breaking even. They end up doing charity lawn care for forever. And that sucks. And you don't want to be that. And a lot of reasons why people end up stuck in kind of the chuck in a truck business model, the solo owner operator, is they can't get out of that mindset. They can't charge more. They can't charge enough to be able to make it worth it, to turn a profit. Or they just don't want to deal with the headache of having other moving parts. But that's a whole other era, whole other conversation. So yeah, you want to be the $20 an hour guy, or the I'll do it for less guy, for as little time as possible. And until you get over this mindset shift that we just talked about, you might have to be in this chapter for a little bit. When you're first getting started, you might have worked in a landscaping business like myself for years. You might have a lot of experience, but when you're a brand new business, your credibility basically goes back to like zero. Okay. So you know that you can deliver a quality product, but now you have to convince your customers of that. And if you don't have a lot to show for yourself, if you don't have reviews, if you don't have a website or Google business profile with like pictures of your work and stuff like that, something that your potential customers can reference to look at, to basically know that you're going to deliver on your promises, essentially, then you might get stuck. Basically, if you can easily illustrate and prove your value, either via sales, via a portfolio of previous work, or customer reviews or testimonials, if you can prove your value and prove that you're going to deliver on your promises, then you can charge what you want, and the end result or the product will be the thing that fulfills that promise with the customer, right? That is where your value comes into play. Your experience and your ability to basically effortlessly convince your customer that you will deliver on your promises is where your value comes into play. If you have a website that shows 20 different paver patios that you've installed, and a lot of them are bigger and more complex than the one that the current customer wants, they should be able to look at that and know beyond any reasonable doubt that you will be able to deliver what they're looking for, 100% guaranteed. So that is what makes having this existing portfolio valuable. If you don't have that when you're first getting started, you cannot provide the outcome or the promise or the product as the value, you need to make your price the value. And now that you understand this, you're like, oh, so that's why, all the $20 an hour guys are in a race to the bottom, because they're not competing on product, they're competing on price. The end result is not the thing that they are placing the value in, it is the price. Okay. So that is what happens when you have these like bidding wars and people just, driving the prices into the fucking ground, which honestly is a lose-lose and no one really benefits from that. Overall, you just kind of tank the average sort of market value of these services in your area. But that's what happens when you have a industry like landscaping where the barrier to entry is so low. And you've just got like a million fucking chucking at trucks that are all in business. And then just like the deeper or like the bigger the businesses get or the longer that they exist, eventually those guys kind of fizzle out. There's 20 new ones popping up every season. And, they last 2 or 3 years. The guys get burnt out, tired because they can't actually scale their business and then they go out. Right. Anyways, that's not going to be you, because you're going to realize that while you're in this phase where your only edge, your only, selling point is that you can do it for less. While you're in that $20 an hour guy phase, you need to at least be able to get something out of it. Okay. And while you're working for less, because at the beginning, you just want to get jobs under your belt, right? You just want to stay busy. You just want to make some money. And you don't have a lot to show for it. So again, we're competing on price. You need to at least be able to get reviews, get testimonials, take a ton of pictures and videos, get content for marketing. And also double down on marketing in the neighborhoods where you're doing that work so that at least you can come out of this ahead and with something, right? In the first couple, months or potentially first season of your business, you might not make a lot of money, but you're going to get a lot of resources and assets in the form of testimonials, videos, marketing materials, reviews. You need to get your face card. You need to get your street reputation. You need to get your general brand awareness, your goodwill with your community, with your local area. You need to raise that before you raise your prices. Okay. So while you're in that $20 an hour phase, or while you're in that I'll do it for less, I'm the cheaper guy phase, at least make something out of it. Okay. By doing the following things we just mentioned: get the reviews, the pictures, content, marketing in those neighborhoods. Come out ahead during this phase, okay? It's what's going to make or break you actually making it to the next level. All right, now let's get into the number crunching part. Let's get into the math, which I know a lot of you guys are probably absolutely brilliant at, right? That's why we're in the landscaping business. We love crunching numbers. I know that's not the case for me, so let's make this quick, simple, easy, and painless, all right? When it comes to pricing and bidding your jobs accurately, you need to know what your overhead is. Now, overhead is not that complicated. It's basically just your fixed costs to run your business. Okay. So you're going to have fixed costs. This might be things like your rent, if you have like a shop space, any like vehicle loans until they're paid off. The government's or the bank is going to come for that money every single month. So you get what I'm trying to say here. The fixed costs, the things that don't change, that you need to pay every single month to run your business, essentially. In top of your overhead as well, you might have some variable costs, some things that change based on the amount of work that you're doing or not doing. Stuff like labor, stuff like gas. You know what I mean? Just basic stuff when it comes to running your business that could fluctuate up or down a little bit, depending on like how much of it you're using that month or something like that. Okay. So I took probably 8 hours of my life, and with some help from ChatGPT, was able to put together a little resource for you guys. This will be linked down in the description of this video, or you can message me on any social media and I'll figure out how to send this to you. But this is the overhead calculator template. So go down to the description of this video, download this so you can kind of follow along here. And there's a couple different tabs. I'm going to shrink myself down a little bit so you guys can more easily see what's going on the screen here. It's more important. So The first tab here is the overhead calculator. Then we got an equipment cost calculator, and then we got a job pricing calculator. Okay. So for the overhead calculator, you've got your categories. This is going to be your different types of expenses. So like fuel, insurance, software, vehicle payments, shop rent, utilities, your company phone. If you've got like tracking or other stuff set up for your trucks and, job management, stuff like that. Any like coaching, communities, software, marketing, all of that stuff. These are your costs that are going to come out of your pocket, out of your bank account every single month to run your business. So what you can do is you can come in here and change any of these. You can add categories, take some of these off. And then what you need to do basically is just calculate how much do you spend every single month on these. So let's say for fuel, we'll spend $1,000 a month on fuel easily. Insurance, I think my insurance was like $250. Might have been a little more than that. I'm not sure. Software, let's say that we're running, what's a good amount? Maybe like $200. Oh, not 2,000. That's crazy. Like $200, $300 a month for software. For vehicle payments, let's say we got like a truck, a trailer, maybe a mower, something like that. We'll do like $750 for vehicle payments. Our shop rent is $1,500. Shop utilities, $400 a month. Gas, water, or not gas, electricity, water, heating, cooling, all that stuff. Company phone, $50 a month. Let's say like we got like trackers and stuff on our truck. Let's say that's like $50 a month. You're a Landscape Accelerator member. You can join via the link in the description. It's going to cost you like $100 or less a month. And then let's say you spend around $2,000 on marketing. Okay. Now that we have all these numbers plugged in, and like I said, you can go through and add more to this if you want. This is going to give you your monthly cost, your daily cost, and then your annual cost and your percentage of the total. Okay. So as you can see here, you also get a nice little pie chart that kind of updates and visually represents all of the costs for your company. Okay. What can we learn from these numbers? This is your overhead. All right. So in order for you to make money, you need to make at least $75,901 every single year. You're going to spend $75,000 a year just to run your business, just to keep things going. That doesn't count you making profits. None of that. This is just your fixed cost, things that 100% that you're going to have to spend every single year regardless. Okay. Your monthly cost, $6,000, a little over $6,000. And then really another important number here is the daily cost. So while you're running your landscaping business, you know that you need to make at least $210 a day to break even. Okay. Now, some of you guys might punch in these numbers and be like, oh shit. Yeah, that's the point. A lot of you guys are not calculating your actual entire, year spread out. And this is how so many of you end up thinking that you're making money. And then at the end of the year, your bank account is empty. And this is why you guys don't actually calculate these numbers and get into the nitty gritty. I mean, down to the penny, dude, figure this out, because this is the difference between you actually running a profitable business and not, right? If you want to work for free, that's fine. Don't do this. But if you actually want to, work hard and make a profit, then, you might want to take us some time to go through and figure these numbers out. So now we know, okay, our overhead is $210 a day. That is our bare minimum. So if we have one crew or two crews, we need to be booking at least $210 a day worth of work to break even, right? That's not profit. So boom, now that we know our overhead, let's move on, okay? This is a little bit more relevant to the lawn care and landscaping guys. But also if you're doing like hardscape projects, stuff like that, if you've got other kind of equipment, then it makes sense too. So this is the equipment cost calculator. All right. Now, this is a big mistake that I see people make when it comes to lawn care pricing specifically, is you're not necessarily factoring wear and tear on your equipment, stuff like that. Okay. If you're pricing your jobs just solely based off of your man hours, you'll make money on the man hours and lose money on the equipment costs. You don't want to do that either. So let's say we just bought a brand new Zero turn mower, we bought it for 12 grand. We expect it to last 5 years. This might actually be more like, 3 or 4. Let's say in annual repairs, we spend around $800 on it, which I think is definitely valid. You blow a tire, a belt snaps, a gear or like a spindle fucking blows up. You never know, right? So let's say around $800 in annual repairs. And for annual fuel costs, this one you can leave in or out depending on if you're going to price your gas differently. But let's say instead of fuel, as in like gas, mowers need like oil changes and stuff like that. So let's just say we spend another, like, I don't know, just call this $1,000 on like fuel, maintenance, oil changes, all of that stuff. And then our annual usage for hours, let's say that we're going to put about 600 hours on this mower throughout the course of the year, right? Typically, it might be a lot more than this, might be a lot less, or let's just say we're going to do like 1,200 hours. We're going to run this for, 600 is better for the sake of this example. All right. So once you've calculated these numbers, now you know what your true hourly cost is for this exact mower. Okay. And it's $9.67. So now you know what it costs you to run your machine for an hour. And also, if you have employees, you know what you're paying them for an hour. Okay. So here's what you can do. You can break this down for all of your different pieces of equipment, your truck and trailer, rototiller, your motor, your skid steer, whatever you've got going on. Now that you have your hourly rate for your equipment, you've got your hourly rate for your employees. That should be pretty simple. Just what are you paying them? And now you have your kind of daily numbers for your business, right? This should give you a much better picture. And if there hasn't been like sparks flying and smoke coming out of your ears when you're doing this for yourself, then, maybe you're closer to your pricing than you think. But if you're crunching these numbers and you're being like, oh shit, I need to charge more, then yeah, this is the point. And now that you have these numbers, you can do this stuff accurately. And also, if you are one of the people that, like we talked about in the beginning of this video, that struggles with, let's say, like not wanting to charge customers thousands of dollars, or like has trouble charging people what they're worth, now you know what it's costing you. So now you can, with full confidence, go to a customer and charge more because you know what you're actually paying. You're like, hey, dude, it's not that I'm trying to take advantage of or trying to be unfair with my pricing. This is what it costs me. And if a customer or anyone has questions about that, first of all, fuck them, they shouldn't. Your price is your price. But at least you can have the confidence to walk away from that knowing that, like, you can back it up with real solid numbers. Okay. And last tab on the calculator here, we've got our job pricing calculator. We have the job pricing calculator. This works a little bit better with project-based stuff, only because the lawn maintenance, there's like a couple other factors that you might need to kind of plus or minus the numbers with. And we'll talk about this when we do examples at the end of this. All right. So let's just say we're going to do a paver patio job. It's a smaller project. It's going to take us 1 day, which will chalk up to being 8 hours. Let's say our crew cost per hour is $75. We got 3 guys at $25 an hour that's going to be on this crew. For materials, let's say it's like $1,500. For the pavers and stuff like that, this will be like a 1 day kind of project. For equipment costs, let's say we're going to get like a skid steer or, a ditch witch or some equipment to help us move, grade, all that stuff, right? Let's just say we're going to spend like let's say like $500 to rent equipment for a day. And our overhead, right? So we know that this is going to be an 8-hour project, which is 1 full day's worth of work, right? What's our overhead? So our overhead calculator, for 1 day, it's $210. We know that we're going to be on this project for the entire day. So we'll put our overhead here as $210. And then how much do we want to make for profit, right? So these are our real costs. This is what we're going to have to pay to deliver this project for the customer. And there might be other things that you need to factor in here, like, are you removing materials from the site? Are you dumping gas? All that stuff. This is just like a rough kind of estimate, right? This will give you a starting number. So what do we want to make for a profit margin? Let's say we want to operate at 30%. So 0.3. This is like from 0.1 being 10% to 0.9 being 90%, right? Or 1 being a 100% markup. So that's how you calculate this. So we know that for a 1-day job with 3 guys at $25 an hour, $1,500 worth of materials, $500 worth of like rental equipment, and then to cover our overhead for that day to be profitable with a 30% markup, we're looking at like around $4,000, right? Like $3,600. Now there's a lot of other stuff like we talked about, your gas, getting to and from the job site. Are you removing any material, stuff like that? But this will give you a good starting number to kind of ballpark and at least make sure that your costs, your fixed costs are covered. From here, you can mark up or down. I would probably only go up from this, but realistically, at least if you have a bare minimum number like this, you know that all of your fixed costs are covered. Okay. So you can't really lose money on this. You might just break even or tack on some more to this to make sure that you've got a cushion, right? So that's how we kind of go through and use this calculator. Again, you guys can download that at the link in the description. All right, so we covered the calculator. We showed you guys the tool. Now let's jump into some examples. The biggest thing to remember in all of this is how much does it cost you and how much is it going to cost the customer? And understanding that you are going to pocket the spread in between those two. The biggest thing to understand and to remember is that the more accurately you know the answer to these questions, the more profitably and the more accurately you're going to be able to bid your jobs. So let's wrap up this video with some examples, okay? We kind of just went over like a paver patio or a landscaping project. And I actually think that project-based work is a little bit easier to bid accurately than like lawn maintenance and mowing, only because there's more factors that go into this, right? With a landscape project, it's kind of cut and dry. It's pretty simple. You've got your hourly rate and your overhead figured out now. So if it's going to be like a 1-day or 2-day project, you know how much you need to make to cover your business's bills and then also make profit on that job, right? And for bigger projects, you can have your hourly rate. You can have kind of like a day rate if that makes things easier for the projects. And now that you have the raw numbers for your overhead, you know what you need to be charging. If a project is going to take you 1 or 2 days, you know how much money you need to be adding on top of that for the cost to just keep your business open during those 2 days, 3 days, whatever it is, right? And then again, for the landscape projects, you're working on T&M, time and materials, right? So when you're bidding out these projects, make a list or be as detailed as possible on exactly how long you think it's going to take your crew to complete the job. So we'll say to do the job. Another thing that you might want to calculate is everything that happens before and everything that happens after. So you might want to show up at a job site at between 7 and 8 in the morning, but your crew shows up to the shop at 6, which means there's 1 hour of time that they are going to be on the clock before they actually start working on this project. So what happens from the moment they get to the shop when they're on the clock to the time they're actually doing the job, and then what happens after they leave the job site and they're coming back to the shop, right? That travel time and that sort of those in between, those limbo times, you should be billing for those, right? If not, that just becomes dead kind of like overhead costs, or it becomes just kind of like margin that slips away out of your project. And this is another big mistake that I see guys making too, is not accounting for the transition periods or the windshield time or, kind of the before and afters. They're only focusing on the time that people are on the property, right? So these are what you'd be calling like unbillable hours, right? Where it's like you have 8 hours in your day, but your crew might only be working for like 6, right? So what those 2 hours, you're still getting charged or you're still paying for your employees for this time, but this is like unbillable work, right? So you need to figure out how you can like make up for or minimize those 2 hours of like dead unbillable time, right? So that's kind of the labor component of it. And then again, sort of similar formula, but just with the materials. Make your bulleted list of all of the different materials for a specific project, what your price is going to be for them, and then your percentage markup, what you're going to charge the customer. Okay. And then also if there's going to be any dumping, removing from the property, anything like that, where it's like, if it's you picking it up and dropping it off and installing it, that's one thing. But if there's stuff coming onto the property and stuff leaving the property, just make sure you account for both of those. So that's kind of landscaping project work. Those, in my opinion, again, are a little more cut and dry because you can just chalk it up to a day rate, figure out all of the expenses that are, you're going to incur to do that project, and then just mark them up. Mowing is a little bit more tricky because even though it's like a lower ticket, so it's less money, there's more obstacles and more things to factor in here. And there's also a lot of stuff that might not be dependent on like that customer's property, but it's just stuff that you need to factor in for like your entire day or your entire like route, right? For a landscape project, it's pretty simple. I can estimate the amount of gas that I'm going to use to do this job. I can estimate the amount of hours that I'm going to spend going to and from the shop to get to this property. With your lawn mowing customers, you have your fixed costs, but now you need to kind of distribute. And instead of saying, hey, it's going to cost me $210 to run this business today, how do I work this into a job that's going to take me one full day where we're only on that property working? And how do I take those costs and instead distribute it across like 12 to 20 or so different customers, right? And how does that all work into what we're going to charge them? So it works best for mowing, in my opinion, if you have like sort of an hourly rate and your overhead figured out. I mean, that's obviously the bare minimum now for all of this, but have those numbers figured out so you know if you're going to be above or below that based on your mowing route for the day, and have a minimum price. When I was doing it, the minimum we would ever charge is $55. Didn't matter how small, how easy, how long it was going to take for us to do a lawn. We figured out the numbers. We could not show up to a property and turn the truck off for less than $55. That was like the absolute bare minimum. So figure out what that number is for you and have that as your minimum price, right? Set the floor for your bids so that it's impossible to lose money, right? Because you're going to have those customers that they have a cookie cutter lawn. It's super small. You're going to be in and out in 10 minutes. And it's like, can I really charge this customer like 60, 70, $100? No, probably not. But you also have opportunity costs and fixed costs from your business that you have to make up for, right? So let's say you can mowing is a little tricky because you could have like a couple acres to mow, or you could have like a small cookie cutter property, right? I never thought about it as much as like the acreage and stuff. I always just thought about how long is it going to take me to do it? And also what's the profitability on that? So if you can mow a small lawn that takes you like 5 to 10 minutes or 15 minutes for $55, how much money are you making on that versus, you could be mowing like a 1 acre property for whatever, 60, 70, $100. I don't know. Again, lawn mowing is a little bit tricky because you have to visualize it. And there's a lot of different factors that go into it. So it's not as cut and dry as a landscape project. But my kind of formula for this when it comes to figuring out my pricing for mowing is I would figure out how long it's going to take me to mow, trim, burrow this property. And I would bid it for like one person. So if I was going to do it myself, how long would it take me? And that gives me my total amount of man hours. So let's say that if I thought it was going to take me 1 hour to like mow, trim, blow the property, now I know that there's 1 hour of like man hours on this actual thing, on this property. And then if you have a crew of like 2 people or 3 people, you know that you're just going to divide that out. It's like, okay, if it's going to take like 1 hour's worth of work and we have 3 people doing it, then we know that this should be around a 20-minute, kind of in and out mow. All right. So when it comes to crunching the time and also your hourly rate, that's how you would do it. So if I know that it would take one person an hour and I've got my 3 guys, let's say they're making $18 an hour, right? So we've got 18 times 3. That means $54 an hour is my labor costs. If I take some of my overhead and stuff from this, so $210 is my daily overhead. Let's say that I'm going to do mowing for like 8 hours. I know that $26 is my overhead. 54 and 26, that's easy maths, good numbers. So we're at $80. And then let's say that, we also factor in the hourly cost for our mower, which is around, $9 to $10. So let's just say we're rounding up, we're at like $90, right? Now, some of you might be like, oh my God, $90 for, a job that's going to take whatever, 30 minutes for a couple guys. It's like, yeah, but dude, you've just been bidding it wrong and not making money because you need to figure out how much it's actually costing you during that period of time. So I would send my quote for like somewhere between 90 and $100, depending on what I felt like was fair. And also, leave yourself some wiggle room to negotiate with your customer. I wouldn't take too much price off, but I always like to just kind of give myself a little bit of room to negotiate. Shoot for the fences. Send a higher number with room to negotiate down and still be profitable. And with mowing, that's kind of important to do sometimes. You're not always going to land the price, but sometimes you might be able to make it work because of some of these other factors, right? Like your windshield time or like challenges and obstacles with the property. Let's say that for the example we just did, like I would want $90 at least for that mow. So I'll send the estimate at $100. And then let's say $120 for a biweekly price or something like that. Figure out what your challenge or what the percentage or markup you want to do for like weekly versus biweekly. Also, you might have wiggle room here depending on how close it is. Let's say you mow the neighbor's yard. Now it's like, okay, I can kind of fudge the numbers a little bit because I know that instead of calculating not only just this property, but also based off of the neighbor's property, I'm not going to have to move my truck at all to get to this mow. So I'm basically like, let's say the neighbor's property is around the same area, same size. So it's like the same amount of time to do it. Now I'm spending an hour with my truck parked and my guys working versus spending a half an hour and then having to drive to the next property. So mowing is a little bit tricky. And I know I haven't given you guys like the perfect exact formula. Mowing is more one of those ones you kind of have to get a feel for it. And once you start to build out your route and, kind of have an idea of what your different crews efficiencies are and sort of how long it's going to take them to do certain stuff and what prices are acceptable in your market. Like you might have trouble charging $100 a week, right? You might have a lot of guys in your area that are mowing for $20, $30, $40. And if that's the case, then like, you have to be fair, you have to make money, but you also have to be competitive. So mowing really is the tricky one. And there's a lot of different like formulas for mowing. Mine was kind of just like what we just talked about, really. Just calculate the hourly rate, figure it out how long it's going to take, and then factor in a bunch of other stuff based off of if the challenge, if the property is going to be a challenge, if it's close to other ones that we have, and stuff like that. Windshield time is a big one. We talked about this with the landscaping projects, figuring out how much time it's going to take to get to that property and how much time it's going to take to get to the next one. Factoring that stuff in as well. Your density really matters here. And also any challenges or obstacles with the property. So I like to give this example. Probably the most profitable mowing client that I ever had. Her property looks something like this. So it was on a hill. This is like a super steep hill. She had a pool, and all of this was like downhill. And then this area was like a swamp. So I think we charged somewhere between like 120 and 150 bucks for this particular mow. And she had like a little spot of grass up here. But the reason for this was she was on a huge hill. So every time it rained, basically the bottom half of her property turned into a complete fucking swamp, right? The first time that we mowed this property, we got our mower buried down here, and it took an absolute, a long time to get it out. So the property had its own challenges and obstacles, right? Basically, all of the runoff, all the drainage would always end up in her backyard, and she had a pool, which didn't really help. So it's like we've got gates that we need to get over. She had a dog. It didn't like shit everywhere, but still, that was just another factor. So it's like basically like this was the most challenging property as far as like mowing and providing the service, right? It's on a hill. It's basically a complete swamp most of the time. There's a pool with fences and gates. There's, like acorns and a bunch of trees and stuff all over the place. And then also there was nowhere to park on her property. And it was also on a hill that was like going up, and like it would come down to her property, but it was on a hill going up. And basically you'd have to park your truck and trailer on this hump with a turn. So it was like oncoming traffic would come around and they wouldn't see the truck until it was like too late, right? So there was no shoulder of the road. It was basically like the single most fucked place to have to park a truck and trailer. And the property had like every challenge or obstacle or thing that could make your mowing life difficult. So we charged accordingly, right? This was like $150 mow weekly. And it was one of my absolute favorite places to trim, to mow, to blow, to do any work, because it was just extremely profitable, right? But it was only profitable because no one else wanted to do it. And she had run through like probably 3 or 4 other guys before us, and all of them just didn't want to deal with the headaches. Now, was it worth it? I don't know. We never really ran into any issues with the traffic. People are always honking and like just being assholes when it comes to the parking. We got our mower stuck. We took our licks, you know what I mean? And we dealt with the obstacles and the challenges of that property. But that's just one example of like when it makes sense to upcharge, to make it worth your time based off of like just other factors that you wouldn't necessarily be able to account for by just raw looking at the numbers, right? Like if you pulled this property up on a spreadsheet or on Google Maps and you just like drew a circle around the areas you were going to mow and had it calculate the square footage or the acreage, and you like only charge based off of the acreage, you would have lost money on that property because of all the other factors that went into it. So it's one of those things where it's like you can have your fixed price, you can have your calculators, you can have all your formulas and stuff, but mowing really is kind of one of those ones where you need to sort of be able to be flexible with it, but also there's more stuff that goes into it than just time and materials, right? So mowing isn't perfect, but that's just sort of all the stuff that I would think about and consider when pricing it. So yeah, that's pretty much the breakdown for you guys. If you made it to the end of this video, you're a real one. You obviously care about growing your lawn care and landscaping business. If that's the case, you should definitely check out the first link in the description and join Landscape Accelerator. It's basically a community, a course, coaching, all in one. It's on school. We've got everything from how to set up your website, Google business profile, do SEO, run your own ads, how to hire, how to set up systems and processes, everything you would possibly need under one roof to grow your landscaping or lawn care business. Plus you get one-on-one access to me, and you get a community full of other guys that are taking this seriously and trying to do the same thing. So overall, super awesome. You should definitely check that out. Again, I'll have a link to this calculator down in the description. You can download this for free. If you're looking for the calculator, but on steroids, honorable mention here, check out ZevBit. I've gone back and forth a lot over the past couple of years with the guys that own this and are developing it. They're all landscaping business owners, and have basically put together like probably the most comprehensive tool that I've seen when it comes to like bidding and estimating projects. Can't recommend them enough. Definitely check this out if you're looking for something kind of like a calculator, but on steroids. It's going to give you like way more features and stuff like that. So highly recommend ZevBit. I'll have a link to this in the description below. This is really great if you guys do a lot of project-based work. So if you do like paver patios, retaining walls, outdoor living space, turf, stuff like that, concrete work, anything that's like, if you're more of a project-based company, then like, dude, this is where you should go. You should check this out. So yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. I appreciate it. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, leave them in the comment section down below. Like, comment, subscribe for more landscaping content. I'll see you guys in the next one. All right. Peace.